Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and U.S. President Donald Trump signed a strategic economic partnership agreement in Riyadh during Trump's regional visit. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu announces that Israeli forces will soon intensify operations in Gaza to subdue Hamas. Russian President Putin says Western companies wanting to return to Russia won't be welcomed unconditionally. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and U.S. President Donald Trump have signed a strategic economic partnership agreement in Riyadh during Trump's regional visit. The partnership includes agreements covering cooperation in energy, defense, mining and mineral resources, judicial and law enforcement collaboration, and space monitoring. In addition, the two countries inked letters of intent to boost joint cooperation on National Guard training, support and upgrades, as well as modernizing and developing the capabilities of the Saudi armed forces. U.S. President Donald Trump arrived in Riyadh today as part of a 4-day tour of the Gulf. Trump is scheduled to travel to Qatar on Wednesday and United Arab Emirates on Thursday. At the Saudi-U.S. Investment Forum, U.S. President Donald Trump highlighted the strong partnership between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, calling it a pillar of stability in the Middle East. He praised the region's future, noting that the people of the region would drive a new era of peace and prosperity. Trump emphasized his administration's successes, including attracting $10 trillion in investments and strengthening the U.S. military. He reiterated that the U.S. would not allow Iran to acquire nuclear weapons and praised efforts to defeat terrorism. Trump also spoke about the U.S. military's global presence and the importance of strategic peace efforts, including the return of detainees held by Hamas.
Offer them a new path and a much better path toward a far better and more hopeful future.
President Trump's first stop in Riyadh is already drawing high-level attention. CEOs to drive forward investment talks and regional diplomacy.
U.S. President Donald Trump is embarked on his first major foreign tour since beginning his second term, visiting 3 key Gulf nations, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. This historic trip, taking place from May 13th to 16th, 2025, underscores the strategic importance of U.S. Gulf relations amid escalating regional tensions, including the ongoing conflict in Gaza and concerns over Iran's nuclear program. The tour begins in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where Trump will attend a Gulf Cooperation Council summit hosted by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to discuss counter-terrorism efforts, maritime security in the Red Sea, and the pursuit of a ceasefire in Gaza. Economically, Trump's visit is focusing heavily on securing major investment deals. Saudi Arabia pledged $600 billion in investments in the U.S. over the next 4 years, while the United Arab Emirates committed to a $1.4 trillion investment package spanning a decade. The visit also follows the U.S. approval of a $3.5 billion arms sale to Saudi Arabia, reinforcing defense cooperation. Following Riyadh, Trump will travel to Doha and Abu Dhabi for bilateral talks with Emirati and Qatari leaders, emphasizing deeper economic ties and joint infrastructure projects. Notably absent from the itinerary is Israel, signaling a shift in focus toward Gulf states amid the complex humanitarian and political situation in Gaza. Overall, Trump's Gulf tour highlights a multifaceted strategy to strengthen U.S. influence in a volatile region. As tensions persist, the success of this visit may shape the future of Middle East diplomacy and U.S. foreign policy in the years ahead.
For more analysis, we now move to Hed Al-Hamadawi in our newsroom. Hed, to you.
Thank you so much, Riham. And for further analysis, we're joined from Cairo by the editor-in-chief of Al-Ahram newspaper, Mr. Mohammed Izzuddin. Welcome to Q News. Now, sir, how does President Trump's statement about the U.S.-Saudi partnership reflect broader geopolitical strategies in the Middle East, and what implications might this have for U.S. relations with other regional powers?
Thank you so much for having me on Q News. Of course, this is a first visit for the President Donald Trump outside of the United States in his second term. So it is a very well prepared and pre-prepared visit, whether regarding the statements or testing the waters or the coordination between the two leaders. The relations between the United States and the Gulf region are very important in this critical timing for both parties. The United States came out of the last presidential terms with a lot of economic issues, in addition to political and military conflicts that the United States was involved in, by being non-decisive enough as a peace sponsoring party, or by toning down the geopolitical tensions. So Trump, through his visit to the region, wants to achieve economic gains by signing agreements, especially in the field of weapons and armament and investment and technology. In addition to energy, he also wants to intervene with a more active role regarding the U.S. foreign policy, whether in the region, or showcasing this by addressing the current tensions, whether in the Pacific region or other regions, and definitely in Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
There are hopes for the U.S. presence this time to lead to positive fruits regarding the Middle East issues, not only regarding the counter-terrorism efforts or guaranteeing free navigation in the Red Sea, but also regarding the Palestinian cause, and especially after the breakthrough and the well-intentioned gesture by the Palestinian resistance to release one of the detainees with U.S. nationality away from the Israeli side, which means that there are opportunities only with the direct involvement of the U.S. in the matter. The meeting with the Saudi Crown Prince, in addition to the Gulf leaders and maybe other leaders also, and the positive statements in the U.S.-Saudi forum that convened today, I think all of this lead to the best interest of the region in general, and it might lead to a breakthrough in different issues related to peace and reducing the tensions, and maybe the cessation of hostilities and the ceasefire in Gaza, even if it's a temporary thing, not complete.
So how might Trump's emphasis on preventing Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons influence future U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, particularly in relation to Saudi Arabia and its allies?
Of course, this decision, if not even commented upon by Saudi Arabia and the UAE and the Gulf in general, the Gulf is highly concerned with Iran not having a nuclear weapon. And therefore, any movements taken in this regard by the United States to stop the Iranian aspirations to have a nuclear weapon, and regarding the nuclear program, and stopping the armament race regarding the long-range missiles or tactical missiles. I think that this will serve the best interests of the Gulf states, and the United States see it also as serving its first and number one ally in the region, Israel. And that's why any interest from the United States to minimize the military power, whether the nuclear power or the tactical one, of the Iranian state, I think it will be in favor of the states of the region, and will gain the political momentum, even if indirectly.
In what ways does Trump's discussion of defeating terrorism and the return of detainees held by Hamas align with his administration's broader counter-terrorism strategies and Middle East peace efforts?
Of course, the United States reshaped its negotiating strategy. The national security official or consultant was changed given his extremist views to support Israel directly, and talking about military strikes directed to Iran, which is something, if happened, will turn the Middle East region and the Gulf into a permanent conflict zone, which is a threat to the economic interests of the United States in the region. This is here about the direct negotiations. Trump or his administration with the new officials found out that there is the well-intentioned from the Palestinian resistance regarding the exchange of detainees, and this was tested by the U.S. administration itself when they communicated through Witkoff and the Doha talks with the presence of Cairo to release the dual national detainee. And consequently, there were statements from Palestine, from the Palestinian side.
I get your point, sir. I get your point. Now, from Cairo, that was editor-in-chief of Al Ahram newspaper, Mr. Mohammed Izzeddin. Thank you so much for joining us here on Q News. And now we go back to Riham Morsi in our studio. Back to you, Riham.
Thank you so much, Hela, for that interview. And we move on to a report by Axios, where U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to meet with the Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara in Saudi Arabia on Wednesday. The Syrian president is reportedly seeking a reset with Washington. Central to al-Shara's agenda is the lifting of U.S. sanctions imposed on Damascus under the Assad regime. Sanctions have remained in place amid widespread human rights concerns and accusations of war crimes. To entice the Trump administration, al-Shara is expected to propose a series of economic and geopolitical concessions. Saudi F-15 fighter jets escorted U.S. President Donald Trump's Air Force One as it entered Saudi airspace. The symbolic aerial escort welcomed Trump at the start of his 4-day Gulf tour, underscoring strategic partnership between Washington and Riyadh. The formation was filmed from aboard the presidential aircraft, with footage later shared by the White House. The streets of Qatar's capital, Doha, were lined with U.S. and Qatari flags on Tuesday as the city prepared to welcome U.S. President Donald Trump. Trump's Gulf tour includes stops in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates, where they focus on deepening economic ties and securing major investment deals. We now turn to the latest developments in Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced that Israeli forces will soon intensify operations in Gaza to, quote, subdue Hamas. Netanyahu said the offensive could pause briefly if Hamas offers to release more detainees, but emphasized that there will be no such situation to stop the war. He also reiterated that his government is working on a population transfer plan for Gaza, claiming many Gazans would choose to leave if given the opportunity. Axios has reported that Israeli negotiators, including Witkoff, will travel to Doha today to resume discussions on the ceasefire in Gaza. During a meeting with the families of Israeli detainees, Steve Witkoff, United States Special Envoy to the Middle East, expressed confidence in achieving progress in the negotiations. He emphasized the importance of a diplomatic solution, highlighting that all released detainees had been returned as part of this effort. The families of the detainees confirmed that Witkoff and Special Presidential Envoy for Detainee Affairs, Adam Buehler, reassured them of their commitment to securing the release of the remaining detainees. The United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees has again raised concerns over severe food shortages in Gaza caused by Israel's continued blockade of the Strip. In a post on X, the agency urged for the blockade to be lifted to allow vital aid to reach those in need. Along with the statement, the agency shared a video highlighting the struggle of one Palestinian family in Gaza grappling to secure enough food for survival. The United Nations has raised alarm over the worsening humanitarian situation in Gaza, with daily food and aid dropping by 70% this week compared to last week. UN spokesperson Stephanie Dujarric reported that the number of daily meals provided to civilians in Gaza plummeted from 840,000 to just 260,000. Dujarric emphasized the urgent need for UN teams to access Gaza and assess the growing need of the population. Beyond food, he highlighted the critical necessity for water, health, nutrition, education, and protection services to be delivered to those affected. The World Health Organization has warned that the ongoing blockade of Gaza is causing increasing deaths and the risk of famine, with the entire population facing severe food shortages. The WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus stated that without immediate access to food and essential supplies, the situation in Gaza will continue to deteriorate, leading to more deaths and malnutrition. The latest food security analysis reveals that nearly 500,000 people in Gaza are in a catastrophic situation, with starvation, illness, and death rampant. The Israeli occupation military has confirmed conducting 2 strikes in southern Lebanon, targeting what it said were Hezbollah operatives. One strike hit the Beaufort Ridge area, where the military claimed a Hezbollah member was operating at a site previously targeted and linked to the group's fire and defense system. A separate drone strike targeted a motorcycle in Houda area, killing 1 person. The military released aerial footage of the strike. The incidents come amid ongoing cross-border tensions between Israel and Hezbollah. Russian President Vladimir Putin has said Western companies that exited Russia following sanctions now want to return, but warned they won't be welcomed back unconditionally. Putin claimed major Western firms are reaching out to re-enter the Russian market, but added Russia will assess how each company behaved when pulling out. Putin emphasized a pragmatic approach, stating that Russia should permit the return of foreign companies only when it serves national interests. If not, he suggested that the government could justify their exclusion through a range of reasons, most of which would align with World Trade Organization regulations. Addressing the possibility of new sanctions, Putin said Russia must be prepared. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said he wanted to negotiate an unconditional 30-day ceasefire face-to-face with Vladimir Putin at this week's talks in Istanbul because only the Russian leader could enact such a pause. Accusing Putin of being scared of meeting him, Zelensky said he expected strong sanctions from the United States and the European Union if the talks did not take place, adding a failed meeting would show that Russia was not ready for diplomacy. China and Brazil have issued a joint statement welcoming peace overtures from Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, urging the start of direct dialogue to end the Ukraine conflict. The statement praised recent signs of willingness for negotiations and called for a fair, lasting peace agreement that addresses all parties' concerns. It highlighted the launch of the Group of Friends for Peace at the UN in September of 2024, aimed at uniting Global South countries to support dialogue efforts. Both nations reaffirmed their commitment to working with the Global South to help resolve the crisis. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has said the European Union is prepared to impose tougher sanctions on Russia if no progress is made this week towards ending the war in Ukraine. Speaking at a joint press conference with the Greek Prime Minister, Merz stated that a new package of sanctions is ready and awaiting action. Merz said the EU is awaiting a response from President Putin, and if meaningful progress is not achieved this week, Member states are prepared to move forward with significantly tougher sanctions at the European level. Merz added that the EU is also considering additional measures in areas such as the energy sector and financial markets. The Kremlin has confirmed that Russia is preparing for peace talks in Turkey to address the ongoing war in Ukraine, but declined to specify who will attend or whether President Vladimir Putin himself will take part. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said that details on the participants will be announced when President Putin deems it appropriate. This follows Putin's Sunday proposal for direct talks with Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has agreed to participate, but insisted that Putin should also attend in person. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here's what we've been covering. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and US President Donald Trump signed a strategic partnership agreement in Riyadh during Trump's regional visit. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu announces that Israeli forces will soon intensify operations in Gaza to subdue Hamas. Russian President Putin says Western companies wanting to return to Russia won't be welcomed unconditionally. This ends the news bulletin for this hour and ends our transmission. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEGY to stay informed. Thank you for watching.